David Morens, a senior advisor to Dr. Fauci for decades, wrote in an email to Dr. Dasick, quote, "I learned from our FOIA lady here how to make emails disappear after I am FOIA'd, but before the search starts."
Good afternoon, beautiful people, and happy Tuesday. Well, this is a major development in the ongoing investigation into what happened behind the scenes during the COVID-19 pandemic. A former senior advisor at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease and a longtime advisor to none other than Dr. Anthony Fauci, aka Mr. Plead the Fifth. But anyway, this senior advisor named Dr. David Morens has now pleaded guilty to a federal conspiracy charge involving efforts to conceal government records. And according to federal prosecutors, this wasn't simply somebody accidentally failing to save a few emails. Morens admitted that he participated in a scheme designed to keep certain government communications away from public scrutiny, including communications connected to coronavirus research grants. And some of what prosecutors say was happening behind the scenes raises questions, serious questions, about transparency inside America's public health agencies during one of the most consequential events in modern history. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Nellie Miranda. David Morens worked at NIAID for years and served as a senior advisor in the office of the director. That means he wasn't some random government employee sitting several layers removed from leadership. He was a senior official working inside the agency that became one of the most powerful and visible institutions in America during COVID. And just yesterday, on August 18th, Morens pleaded guilty in federal court in Maryland to conspiracy to commit offenses and to defraud the United States. According to the Justice Department, the scheme involved attempts to evade both the Freedom of Information Act, commonly known as FOIA, and federal record-keeping requirements. So FOIA is one of the tools journalists, watchdog organizations, and ordinary Americans can use to obtain records showing what their government is doing. And according to prosecutors, Morens and others were deliberately trying to keep certain communications outside of that system. Here is a clip of Comer explaining how Dr. Morens planned to get away with this. Take a listen.
David Morens, a senior advisor to Dr. Fauci for decades, wrote in an email to Dr. Dasick, quote, "I learned from our FOIA lady here how to make emails disappear after I am FOIA'd, but before the search starts. So I think we're all safe. Plus, I deleted most of those earlier emails after sending them to Gmail," end quote. Is that consistent with NIH document retention policies?
It is not.
Does the NIH FOIA office teach employees how to avoid transparency?
I certainly hope not.
He also later wrote Dr. Dasick, and I quote, "We are all smart enough to know to never have smoking guns, and if we did, we wouldn't put them in emails. And if we found them, we would delete them," end quote. Is that consistent with NIH document retention policies?
It is not.
Finally, emails show that Dr. Morens would share internal discussions regarding upcoming FOIA releases with Dr. Dasick. He would then help Dr. Dasick craft responses to documents being released in these FOIAs. Are those actions consistent with NIH policies?
If those actions occurred, they would not be consistent. No.
So do these actions concern you, Dr. Tabak?
It does indeed.
What is Dr. Morens' current employment status?
He is an employee of NIH.
It is absolutely disgusting. Dr. Morens admitted that he used personal email accounts for government-related communications. So why does that matter? Well, because if you are communicating through official government systems, those communications can potentially become federal records and may ultimately be produced through FOIA. But communications taking place somewhere else can be much harder for the government and therefore the public to locate. And according to the government's case, avoiding disclosure was the point. The Justice Department says the conspiracy stretched from roughly April 2020 through June 2023, and the communications involved some extremely sensitive issues, including federal funding connected to coronavirus research. One of the biggest issues involved a grant that had been awarded to EcoHealth Alliance. EcoHealth Alliance had received federal funding connected to research involving bat coronaviruses, including research involving the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That relationship became intensely controversial as questions exploded over the origins of COVID-19. So to be clear, a senior government official has admitted participating in a conspiracy to evade transparency requirements surrounding government records. And regardless of where you stand on COVID origins, that should concern everybody, because Americans were asking legitimate questions. Where did this virus come from? What research was being funded? What did government officials know? What were scientists saying privately? And were those private conversations consistent with what Americans were being told publicly? Those aren't unreasonable questions, especially at the rate that people were dying from COVID. They made our lives miserable for years, and for what exactly? Hang them. Kidding. But here's another part of the story. According to prosecutors, Morens wasn't merely communicating privately. The government says that he also used his position to assist a co-conspirator connected to an organization receiving government funding. Court documents don't publicly identify that individual by name, although reporting has noted that the description appears consistent with EcoHealth Alliance's former president, Peter Daszak. Daszak has not been charged with a crime in this case. But according to prosecutors, Morens shared non-public information and assisted efforts surrounding the restoration of a terminated grant. And according to reporting on the plea documents, Dr. Morens also received things like expensive wine and offers of meals. And at one point, prosecutors say that Morens directed communications to stay away from government phones and government email servers. So just think about the significance of that. Government transparency laws exist specifically because public officials aren't supposed to get to decide which government business the public is allowed to discover. So what exactly were they trying to hide? And this story becomes even more significant because Morens had previously been questioned by Congress. House investigators spent years examining the government's pandemic response and the origins of COVID. Morens became a major figure in that investigation after emails surfaced showing him discussing ways of communicating outside the normal government channels. He testified before Congress in 2024, and now 2 years later, he has pleaded guilty in federal court. So naturally, the next question everybody is asking is, what does this mean for Anthony Fauci? Because we know that Morens did not act alone. He served as a senior advisor during Fauci's leadership of NIAID, and Fauci was the face of COVID. He lied about the origins of COVID. He lied about the gain of function research. And now he can't seem to recall anything. He pleads the fifth. He don't know anything. Don't ask him anything.
About the origins from day one. Why was he lying? Because he funded those studies at the Wuhan lab. And he funded the studies at the University of North Carolina that developed the techniques for weaponizing COVID-19 and then gave those Ralph Barrick, his funded scientist at the University of North Carolina, gave those to Xi Jinping, the scientist, the bat lady scientist in the Wuhan lab, and he taught her a technique that Anthony Fauci had paid him to develop called seamless ligation, which is also called no-seam. It's a way of manipulating the virus to make it deadly to human beings and then covering up the evidence of human manipulation. And why would anybody spend NIH money developing that kind of technology? It's bioweapons technology. It has nothing to do with public health. It's the opposite. It's the inverse of anything you would want to do with public health. Well, he took that and he gave it to the Chinese military lab in Wuhan. So these are, and as you mentioned at the beginning of this, we today, NIH, has now issued a policy to make sure these kind of experiments can never happen again, that NIH will never again pay for a dangerous gain of function experiment.
It's important to note that Fauci has not been charged in Morens' criminal case, but their close relationship deserves scrutiny, and it makes you wonder who else were involved. Who were all the players? What else did they know? And I wonder if Morens' cooperation could lead investigators somewhere else. We don't know, but those are questions that deserve answers. David Morens is 78 years old, and under the plea agreement, he faces a maximum sentence of 5 years in federal prison, along with the possibility of a fine. His sentencing is currently scheduled for November 12th, and the FBI says the investigation remains ongoing. This case matters beyond David Morens because COVID changed this country completely. Businesses were closed. Schools were shut down. People lost jobs. Families couldn't visit loved ones. People died. And Americans were told to trust the public health institutions making decisions that affected virtually every single part of their lives. And when the government exercises that level of authority, transparency becomes even more important. Officials don't get to demand public trust while simultaneously attempting to keep public records away from the public. The one thing that COVID did for a lot of us was open our eyes to the healthcare system and the institutions that we were taught to trust without question. Before the pandemic, most people probably never thought twice about agencies like the CDC, the NIH, or the people running our public health institutions. We assumed that they had the information, they were following the science, and therefore we should simply listen. But COVID changed that. It taught many of us that trusting experts should never mean blindly following them off a cliff. Scientists, doctors, and government agencies can be wrong, and asking questions doesn't make you anti-science. If anything, it made more Americans willing to say, well, show us the evidence. Show us the data. Just be a little bit transparent with us. And from where I see it, transparency just isn't their thing. But what are your thoughts? Do you believe Morens' guilty plea would lead to additional charges? And do you believe Congress should continue investigating what happened inside NIAID during the pandemic? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you got any value from today's video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.